From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Hello, welcome back. Our guest today is Fred Fleitz, formerly of the Trump White House National Security Council and now at the Center for Security Policy. Welcome, Fred. We will go to our first issue, which is issue 1, high theater.
I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck, because the people of this country don't want criminals and people that have lots of problems and drugs pouring into our country. So I will take the mantle. I will be the one to shut it down. I'm not going to blame you for it.
All the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. The theatrics on display at the White House this week were something to behold. Meeting with Democratic leaders, President Trump demanded money for his border security wall. If he doesn't get it, the president says, he'll shut the government down and take the blame. But as things stand, Democrats say no deal.
Pat, I want to frame this in the broader potential for negotiations, infrastructure, healthcare, whatever it might be with Democrats next year. But do you think the government will shut down?
No, I don't think the government's going to shut down. There was an indecorous meeting, if I've ever seen one in the Oval Office, that they put on national
Indecorous.
television. I think that Mike Pence handled it beautifully.
Sleeping?
Saying nothing, but I mean, what President Trump is saying is, in effect, look, you're going to give me the wall or I'm going to shut down the government. You're going to have to vote for the wall in the Senate, and 10 Democrats in the Senate don't vote for the wall. I'm going to shut down the government. I don't think this is a threat that he can really follow through on. I think they're going to work some deal out to avoid a shutdown of the government. I think if Trump shuts down the government in this situation, he will take the blame.
Eleanor.
The beauty part is that Republicans have worked for weeks to lay the groundwork to call it the Schumer shutdown. And the president says, I own it, it's my shutdown. I assume there's still someone left in the White House who can talk the Mad King off of the ledge. Maybe Fred can tell us about that. Because to shut down the government while he's in Mar-a-Lago playing golf in the sunshine is very bad politics. It's wrong on every count. But I think we should be looking more broadly at immigration policy and the death of that 7-year-old girl who was dehydrated and couldn't get medical attention really focuses attention on the border and what kind of resources we have there and how we're treating this. The inhumane quality of this administration's policy just cannot stand.
Well, Fred, you've left the White House, so you don't have to feel you have to stick up. But what do you see here in terms of the potential of the president to follow through on this threat?
Well, look, I admire the president for sticking to his principles in the border wall, and I agree with him for trying to highlight how the Democrats do not care about defending the southern border. But he's made a mistake here. He will be blamed for the shutdown, and frankly, I believe the Democrats are prepared to inflict on the American people unending pain to damage him politically and to make sure he is not reelected. The president has to find a way out. I say he stop talking about shutting down the government, blame the Democrats because of their refusal to defend the southern border.
Clarence.
I think if President Trump did follow through on having a shutdown, he would learn, as Newt Gingrich and others in the past have learned, that you tend to get, the Republicans tend to get the blame for this sort of thing after they've already stuck their necks out and identified so closely with the cause. And I think President Trump will find a way to just kind of hide himself the way Mike Pence was trying to in that meeting, becoming elf on the shelf, just watching while the Republicans over in the House and the Senate work out something that's going to avoid a shutdown. And he's not going to get the wall from Democrats. They're not going to vote for it.
Well, let me ask you this. A good friend of mine said, why doesn't the president put in the border request funding as part of an infrastructure bill that Democrats are very much in favor of? Do you think Democrats would support it in that regard?
That's the kind of tactic I would take, and I'm sure you would too, Tom, but that's a reasonable tactic. We're beyond reason now. The fact is, the wall is not border security, and Democrats can make that argument, and it works.
Yeah, the Democrats have offered $1.3 billion, I think, for border security.
Needs 5.
And, pardon me?
He needs 5.
He needs 5. But the Democrats are not going to support a concrete barrier.
Right.
And you have all kinds of experts on the left and the right that say a concrete barrier is not really how you defend the southern border.
Right.
And Democrats are for defending the southern border. Of course they are.
Well,
but they're not for doing it the way the president is doing it.
That's a mega issue. The President of the United States is dead right on border security. And as I've mentioned here on shows, I really believe that immigration on our southern borders is really a mega issue for the, frankly, for the foreseeable future, decades ahead. And what Trump did do there's no doubt in this, as I said, this indecorous moment, there's no doubt where he stood on securing the borders, and where Schumer and Pelosi, who seem to be saying, let's take this behind closed doors, where they stand. So the two parties are clearly identified now. I think in the long term, even in the intermediate term, I think the Republicans are on the dead right side of the issue.
All right, so let me ask Fred a question. Fred, do you think with the potential of border security and comprehensive immigration reform, you know, as that line that only Nixon could go to China, only Trump could maybe change and take a more do you think there's any chance of bipartisanship in 2019?
There's talk right now of people I know that the president should try to strike a deal with the Democrats in 2019. And I hope he will try this, but I don't think the Democrats have any interest in this. I think
I haven't found anything the Democrats oppose except the wall.
I think Trump hatred is so severe right now. The whole purpose of Congress, starting in 2019, is to defeat him in 2020. There's not going to be any real deal.
You're trying to make this a personality contest. It's not a personality contest. It's about the changing demographics of what's happening at the border. The numbers are way down, but what's coming are families with children because of the terrible conditions in those countries.
They're mostly military-aged males.
And this president has cut off the money that the Obama administration did to try to help stabilize the conditions in those countries. And you cannot have people they are taking up the water stations so they don't get water. There are ways to control the border without treating people like they're animals not getting
Let's let Fred respond.
Attention.
The Democrats used to care about defending the border. They used to talk about stopping illegal aliens. President Trump does not want to have what happened to Europe happen here with unvetted aliens coming into our country without vetting.
Fred, please. Now, don't go around talking about Democrats don't support border security. Democrats have always supported border security. The fact is that the Republicans have unfortunately demagogued this issue to make people afraid of anybody who
the
wants to.
demagoguery is
Look, where does the country stand? And I think where Trump stands with the American people securing the border, I'll tell you why there's not going to be a big deal. Because the Democrats will demand what Republicans and conservatives call amnesty for the DACA folks or for a larger group than that. Trump cannot do that, in my judgment. That would be like George H.W. Bush.
Raising taxes.
No new taxes, read my lips, and then raising taxes.
He's already done that. He has come out in favor of the Dreamers many times. So that's not a reversal of a pledge.
But if you put that in the deal, and I think he's got a problem.
Well, he'd be going back on his own earlier promises then, because it's not a question of this being border security can be secured, and Democrats have voted for millions in favor of other alternative methods.
Obama was called the deporter-in-chief.
Oh, yeah.
He took all these tough measures in the hopes of getting a deal on the Hill, and the Senate passed immigration reform with 68 votes, and Paul Spineless Ryan wouldn't put it to a vote because he couldn't get a majority of the majority, the old Hastert rule, while Dennis Hastert is in jail for
That is exactly the
pornography.
point I'm making. You cannot. That was an amnesty bill that they killed. Do you recall?
Amnesty is another one of those words that's been abused and re-abused.
All right, Fred, you can make a concluding.
You talk about pathway to citizenship.
I believe,
you call that amnesty,
look, the left ultimately wants open borders to change the political system of this country. I think that's where the Democratic Party is going.
That's
and
right.
They do not.
We just want to blend in with Mexico and all the countries and have no borders.
They do not want to defend the southern border.
All
right. This is obviously a very, very ferocious issue. Let's bring on another issue. The affordable. You can have a concluding comment here, but also I want to ask you about the Affordable Care Act.
Please.
So a concluding comment on immigration, but then what do you think is going to happen with the Supreme Court and the ACA?
Yeah, on immigration, just look at the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who do get turned away under Democratic as well as Republican administrations. It's kind of a red herring issue, I think. But on ACA, this judge tossing out ACA as unconstitutional at this point is a big favor for the Democrats, in my view, because this is right after Democrats have scored big gains in the House by running on the idea of protecting pre-existing conditions. Republicans don't have a plan for replacing Obamacare. Never have. They don't toss it out as a slogan. Meanwhile, more and more the public is looking for some way. Millions of people now have been denied coverage if this.
What the White House is going to do, and what Justice is going to do, they're going to say the law will stay in place as this moves its way through the appellate court and up to the Supreme Court, and they'll kick this can right up the road. But as for open borders, the North American Union, do you remember that idea about a decade ago, Eleanor?
All right,
all the liberals were in favor of all of us getting together in one country.
That hasn't quite passed, has it?
I haven't.
No.
I only remember liberals wanting to move to Canada if a Republican got into office. That's, that is as ridiculous as what you just proposed.
Eleanor, what about health care?
Fanciful.
Why didn't
health care, Justice Roberts devised a workaround to save the Obamacare by calling it a tax. Now that there's no tax, is it unconstitutional? The Congress could fix this in 10 minutes by saying the tax is now $1 per American, and whoops, it'll be safe. Congress can fix it. If it goes to the Supreme Court, I'm looking to Justice Roberts and Justice Kavanaugh to understand what it would do if you ripped health care away from millions of people, and I expect they will save it.
Fred.
If it goes that far.
I've always thought Obamacare is legally dubious and forced on the American people by the Obama administration. Rest in peace.
All right, but Fred, let me ask you a follow-up to that. With the Republicans now are in favor of protecting people with pre-existing conditions, do you think that will be a sort of keystone achievement for President Obama, even as Republicans say no Medicare for all, the big state, that's a problem?
I think a good argument can be made for that Obama changed the landscape for health care in this country, but I think a lot was done that the American people did not support. Americans are not able to keep their own doctors. Health care costs have gone up significantly, so...
I see a Buchanan smile here, and then we'll go to Eleanor.
For better or worse, Obama owns Obamacare.
All right, Eleanor.
I think everybody who criticizes Obamacare ought to show their insurance card and let the American people know where they're getting their insurance from, and that they just want to take it away from everybody else.
Clarence,
by the way, I've got private insurance. I don't always get my choice of doctor either. I mean, this
right.
is not something new with Obama.
And
yes, sir.
On that point, we've seen Julian Castro come out this week talking about Medicare for all, possible presidential candidate. Do you think that will be the consensus position of the Democratic presidential candidates?
It's moving that way, and I view Medicare for all like I view the wall. It's a great slogan, it's a great way to rally people for votes, but actually implementing it requires all that sausage making that's a lot more boring. But obviously the public likes the idea.
But I will say the left, I mean, this is a good argument of the left, and taking care of tuitions and all the rest of it, and student loans. I think the left is going to drive these arguments in the Democratic primaries, and I think they're going to have an appeal, and they're going to help people like Beto, what's his name? Beto O'Rourke.
Well, there are variations on the Medicare for all. You could just drop it down to people 55 and over, and there's a lot of interest in that as well. Health care will be a major issue, obviously.
All right, very good discussions there. When we come back, disappearing Canadians, China, Brexit, and some other stuff. Also, stay with us during the break as we hear from some experts about how to improve our nation's schools. It's the focus of a new report called Promise to Practice from the Collaborative for Student Success. See you in a moment.
What do you believe is the most important consideration when we're talking about doing this or having this turnaround with our lowest performing schools?
So turnarounds are possible, and you can take giant systems and organizations and take them into the modern era and have success. However, we also have a number of schools and school districts who look more like Sears. Where they're closing buildings and they don't have a great strategy, and it's not clear what the future is going to bring. So how do we make sure that we're putting our bets, our resources, our talent into the system in the right way? DC, I think, is working on this and trying to do that. We've identified other states in the Promise to Practice report that are really trying to organize themselves around what's the right organizing principle. It's not the same for everyone. How do we make sure we have the right staff in the right places? We use data, we use research as much as we have, and we continue to check back in. We don't just set it and forget it. We actually come back and say, did that work?
Issue 2, disappearing Canadians.
2 Canadians are now detained in China. This follows Canada's ongoing detention on a U.S. arrest warrant of a Huawei technology giant executive. Businessman Michael Spavor and former diplomat Michael Kovrig are accused by China of threatening national security. But analysts believe their plight has a simple rationale, namely payback. China, they say, is showing Canada and the U.S. that it will respond in kind if the U.S. sanctions its citizens.
Eleanor, do we double down here, or is this a sign to, hey, back off a bit?
We don't double down, although we might. From the Chinese perspective, this was really the least they could do. Because this woman is the daughter of the founding executive of this company. It's the Apple of China. President Xi couldn't let this stand. The Canadians are handling this as a kind of a law and order matter. They're okay with it. And then the president jumps into it and says, oh, I may use these as sort of pawns in the ongoing tariff war. Now, he doesn't realize you say that. You put every American businessman at risk. You're saying, okay, hostage taking is the new tactic in the trade war. Again, I hope the same people who talked the Mad King off the ledge on the government shutdown will be there to pull him back on trade, although he's got some pretty hard-liners there in his ear about trade. And Pat's already coming out of his chair because I'm sure. No, okay.
But I will say this. I mean, look, I think they got two hostage trade for the one. But look, I think what's the key thing here is this deal with the Chinese. Now, the Chinese are under considerable pressure. Their economy is not growing that well. And if these talks somehow break down, you get a 25% tariff on $500 billion of Chinese exports to the United States. A lot of Chinese are going right through the windshield. At the same time, if Trump plays real hardball here, we are headed into almost, it looks like, I don't know how you avoid something of a second Cold War, this time with China, which is stealing our technology, which is threatening to take, I mean, this G5 stuff that is going on, they're taking secrets from the Navy. I think we're in a very serious turning point here, and I don't know how the United States, frankly, what kind of decisions we're going to make as to what the future is going to be with China.
President Page, what decisions do we make?
Well, both of my colleagues make very good points here. I think this is a time for what I call the what he really means is squad to come out diplomatically and talk to the Chinese and say what President Trump really means here is that we can negotiate this because they've really got to. Neither the Chinese nor us have an interest in another Cold War, and they have much more important issues to deal with than these individual hostages. But President Trump is the kind of a guy who just wakes up and he picks up the Twitter machine and he starts saying, oh yeah, well, they're going to do that. Well, we're going to take even more of them and blah, blah, blah.
Fred, then Eleanor.
Look, the fact that China decided to arrest a Huawei CFO was extraordinary because China knew there would be retaliation. I think that simply goes that our indictment of this woman, I think, must have been very strong. I think China made a mistake of taking more innocent people hostage in their country. It has a tendency to do this. I think this hurt China. However, when we're talking about what Trump is saying, offering to let this woman go to advance the trade deal is a small price to pay for this deal, which I think we need very badly. I think we made our point about Huawei. We made our point about lawless behavior by China.
Look, I agree. The swag in exchange for lots more soybean purchases. And the thing is, that if her issues are so severe, then she would be brought here and be tried in an American court. You'd have to have an awfully high bar to do that because she's accused of violating sanctions that were actually lifted when Obama was in office, have been reimposed. I mean, so the severity there is questionable. So I totally agree with you.
I think there may be
there is a deal being made, and maybe Trump actually gets commended for it.
Look, Trump is has a very serious problem here. Look, we are buying $500 billion a year worth of goods from China, selling them $100 billion. They got a $400 billion trade surplus. They're using this money to build up their navies, they're buying bases, and all the rest of it. We got to ask ourselves, if they're stealing all our technology and behaving like a Cold War adversary, can you give them every year a $400 billion trade surplus?
So you want these big tariffs?
No, what I'm saying is Trump's got to make a clear decision as to where we are going. This is like 1947, 48, 49
Truman,
with the Soviets.
Trump and Truman.
You're asking a lot seeking a clear decision.
Do you think President Trump has the same sense of this is the defining challenge of our time as Harry Truman had with the Soviet Union? As someone who's been intimately involved on these issues, how far is President Trump willing to push this?
I think the president sees China as the main threat to our national security long term. I also believe the president and his economic advisors understand that getting a trade deal with China is going to be very difficult and it's going to take time. They're going to drag their feet. They're going to try to wait out this administration. And I think the president is prepared to respond to put pain on China to make them negotiate in earnest. And I think he's already doing that.
Pardon me. Eleanor, Senator Cotton and some others in the Senate are pushing now new legislation to put more sanctions on Iranian banks, another escalation. Where do you see that playing out?
I hope Cotton doesn't have too many people backing him, because I don't think that's going to work with Iran, and I still deplore the fact that the administration walked away from the Iranian nuclear deal.
We can't. Look, we're talking about a Cold War with a country, China, which has 10 times the population, 10 times the economy of Russia. We're already in a virtual Cold War with the Russians. Now we're going to push the Iranians until we start a battle with them, and we're fighting all over the Middle East. I mean, the United States cannot maintain all of these kinds of commitments. We're going to have to find a way to end some of these conflicts.
Yeah.
I suspect they're going to negotiate a release for this woman back to China, where she'll be.
What about Iran, though?
Yeah. On the Iran, I think that we are not going to. Well, you're asking about this current proposal.
What about Saudi Arabia?
All right, let me ask Clarence.
Shift.
Yeah, what do you think is going to happen, though, with the effort to put more pressure on Iran? Do you think that is a good thing or a dangerous thing?
I think it's a necessary thing, but you can exert pressure in a lot of different ways. Right now, it is essential for us to have some kind of talking relationship with Iran to ratchet things down while they're still spreading mischief all over the Middle East.
Well, I disagree with Eleanor. I think the nuclear
and Pat, you disagree with Pat.
The nuclear deal, well, at Pat too, the nuclear deal with Iran was an absolute fraud. I wrote a book on this called Obama Bomb, about how it actually allowed Iran to continue to pursue nuclear weapons technology while the deal is in effect. I have a beef with the Trump administration when it re-implemented sanctions recently, because there were exemptions that allowed China to buy Iranian oil while these sanctions are in place. I think that was a mistake. This legislation may fill that gap.
The administration is so interested in cracking down on Iran, but they give Saudi Arabia a pass. The Senate spoke this week. 7 Republicans joined Democrats on wanting to end U.S. involvement in that grotesque war in Yemen, and the Senate voted unanimously to condemn Mohammed bin Salman and his orchestration of the murder of Khashoggi.
Where was the Senate and where was the Congress for the last 4 years? Congress declares war, but we've been helping, aiding, handling the Saudi account, providing fuel for their planes, bombs and the planes, all the rest of it for 3 years. And you're right, it is a horrific war in which we got no vital interest, but we are assisting in killing thousands and thousands of people.
And yet, Pat, some would say that President Trump's leverage with the Saudis is now what is pushing towards a ceasefire.
Well, I'll tell you what's pushing toward a ceasefire now is because people got sick when they said they're going to shut down Hodeidah and starve all these people to death.
2 million people.
And President Trump stopped that. I read a piece on that.
Now we're going to declare President Trump the hero of Yemen?
All right, well, come in here.
Look, I think it's more complicated than that. We have tried to pressure the Saudis concerning the killing of Khashoggi and on Yemen. Remember that the problem in Yemen is fueled by the Iranians. Iranians are arming the Houthi rebels to offset the Saudi regime. It's a complicated situation. And look, I understand Congress is speaking out. They've made some good points on what's happening right there. But I think blaming this on Trump is unfair.
Let me ask you a follow-up there, Fred.
He's the president.
All right, how do you see...
This predated Trump.
How do you see this playing out over the longer term with Iran, the pressure? Are we going to get a better Iran nuclear deal, which is the objective?
I think the objective in the short term is to pressure Iran and to prevent it from getting nuclear technology. Right. Getting a better deal is going to be very difficult.
You've said that they're trying to get the technology, and you say, and in effect, they're violating the treaty. Why don't we show where they're violating the treaty? Because nobody else, including the gang in Vienna, can figure it out.
Right.
That's not true.
Let Fred respond, and then I'll come to Eleanor.
There's numerous violations. Iran is continuing to pursue enrichment technology in violation of the agreement. It's developing advanced centrifuges in violation of the agreement.
Why does nobody agree with the United States on that signed it, the other 5 members?
Eleanor.
That's
the
right.
Liberal elite
Our allies
Eleanor.
plus Russia and China, everybody says Iran is abiding by the deal.
Israel doesn't think that.
Israel
Saudi Arabia
has
doesn't
always
think that.
Israel, Saudi Arabia.
Gulf states don't think that.
They've always
they want us to fight a war.
All right, President Page.
That's bogus.
Bring order.
Sanctions, right? They're arch enemies of Iran, and Iran and Israel. I'm sorry, Saudis and Israel are working on back channel relations, which are positive. But that doesn't mean, like Pat said, that we should be funding the bombing of Yemen by Saudi. Saudis, who don't have apparently much regard for human rights as we do.
All these countries, the UAE, the Saudi Arabia, the Israelis, they will hold our coat while we go fight Iran, just the way a lot of them held our coat when we got into a war with Iraq.
I don't want a war with Iran, but I don't want Iran to get nuclear weapons. Maybe we can't stop them from getting nuclear weapons.
We did
but
stop them.
No, we didn't. We can slow them from getting nuclear weapons by denying them access to nuclear technology. That, I think, should be the primary goal of our policy.
Look, I agree with denying them nuclear technology. You're on.
But they're getting it under the nuclear deal.
But that was phenomenal.
Show your cards, because nobody agrees with you. That is an
Lots
ideological argument.
It's not true.
You're
Lots of
making.
people agree.
Did your book sell well?
Well, I did okay.
So you're getting the full treatment on the panel now.
Read Obama. It explains the whole situation.
Okay, all right. Well, I think we got through that issue. Very important stuff, though. When we come back, predictions.
The McLaughlin Group is brought to you in part by Eric.org. With gridlock in Washington, states are stepping in to mandate paid sick and family leave policies, creating a compliance nightmare for companies with a nationwide workforce. The ERISA Industry Committee is fighting back. Learn how we can help your company at Eric.org.
For more than a century, the Greater Washington Board of Trade has focused on growing our regional economy. We work every day to foster collaboration, build pipelines for skilled workers, embrace innovation, and attract investment. We must think, plan, and act as a region to better leverage our shared assets so we can continue shaping and advancing a vibrant regional economy for the next 100 years.
Predictions, Pat.
I'm the federal judge who declared Obamacare null and void. In the immortal words of George H.W. Bush, this will not stand.
All right, Eleanor.
The next Congress will be defined by its ability to handle the multiple investigations coming at the president and how he illegitimately gained the office and has criminally enriched himself and his family during the campaign and while president.
Okay, Fred.
There will be a summit between North Korean leader Kim and President Trump in early 2020. I think it's going to lead to inspections of a nuclear site and a missile site, and hopefully it will help the negotiations.
Interesting. Clarence.
On the side of the Democratic presidential nominees, I see a big bump building for Sherrod Brown. The question is how long he'll be able to keep it, and got to avoid peaking too soon.
If you had to pick one person now to be the nominee, who would it be?
What I would think would be best for the party, Sherrod Brown.
Okay, all right.
Actually, yeah.
Okay, all right. I predict that the next British Prime Minister will be Sajid Javid, who is the Home Secretary. He's a Conservative. We hope you'll tune in again next week. It was a good show. Bye-bye.